Hello, my fellow adventurers. It's Elara. Welcome back to our cozy sanctuary, where the enchanting world of Middle-earth comes alive. So, find your most comfortable spot. Let the soothing sounds of ancient legends and epic adventures surround you, and allow yourself to be carried away into the captivating realms of this timeless journey. Tonight, we delve into the legendary last alliance of Elves and Men, where valor clashed with darkness in a battle for the fate of Middle-earth. Let me know in the comments where you're from and what time it currently is. The exiles brought countless powerful and wondrous treasures and valuable family heirlooms from Numenor to Lindon. Among the most famous were the 7 stones and the white tree. The white tree was produced from a fruit taken shortly before its burning by Sauron from the beautiful Nimloth, which grew in the royal gardens of the city of Armenellos in Numenor. And Nimloth descended from the tree of Tirion, which was a likeness of Telperion, the oldest of the trees nurtured by Yavanna in the realm of the Valar. The tree was planted in Minas Ithil, in front of Isildur's house, as a monument to the light of the Eldar and Valinor, for he had preserved the fruit before its destruction. But the stones were divided. Elendil took 3, and his sons took 2 each. What Elendil took was placed on the towers of Emin-Baraid and Amon-Sul, and in the city of Anúminas. The ones left with his sons were in Minas Ithil, Minas Anor, Orthanc, and Osgiliath. Those who looked upon these stones could see distant things within them. Most showed only things near another stone, for the stones called to each other. But those with strong wills and thoughts could see wherever they looked. Thus, the Númenóreans were able to become aware of many things their enemies wished to keep secret. And in their mighty days, very few things escaped their notice. It is said that the towers of Emin-Baraid were not actually built by the Númenórean exiles. They were raised by Gil-galad for his friend Elendil, and the Seeing Stone of Emin-Baraid was placed in the tallest of the towers, Elostirion. There, Elendil would look out after the burden of exile fell upon him, gazing across the separating seas, and it is believed that he could see very far, even the tower of Avalonia upon Eresia, where the ruling stone was placed, and still remains. These stones were given as a gift to Amandil, Elendil's father, by the Eldar, who could no longer come into the realm under Sauron's shadow, to provide comfort to the faithful of Numenor in dark days. The stones were known as Palantiri. Thus, the Númenórean exiles established their kingdoms in Arnor and Gondor. But it was not long before it became apparent that their enemy, Sauron, had returned. As told, the ancient kingdom behind the Shadow Mountains, Ephel-Duath, had secretly returned to Mordor, which lay to the east of Gondor. There, upon the Gorgoroth Plateau, was the great and strong fortress he built, Barad-dûr. There was a fiery mountain, which the elves called Orodruin. Sauron had settled there long ago, because the fire he used in sorcery and ironworking was springing from the heart of the earth. In the midst of Mordor, he had forged the ruling ring. Now he sat in darkness, deep in thought, until he could create a new form for himself. And this new form was fearsome, for when Numenor sank into the waters, its bright appearance had been separated from him forever. Now, having put on the great ring, he cloaked himself in power, Sauron's evil was something even the strongest of elves and men could scarcely endure. Sauron was now preparing for war against the Eldar and the Western men. The fires of the mountain had awakened again. Thus, when the smoke of distant Orodruin was seen, it became clear that Sauron had returned, and the Númenóreans renamed the mountain Mount Doom, Amon Amarth. Sauron gathered a great power by uniting his servants from the east and south. Among them were many from Númenor's noble race. For during Sauron's time of hospitality in their lands, nearly all of the people's hearts had turned to darkness. Thus, those who had set sail eastward, establishing fortresses along the coasts, were already prepared to bow to his will and continued to serve him willingly in Middle-earth. They were refugees who had settled in the distant southern lands due to Gil-galad's power, formidable and evil masters. Yet two among them remained there, Herumor and Fuinur, who gained power among the Haradrim, a strong and cruel people who had settled in the vast lands south of Mordor, beyond the mouths of Anduin. Now Sauron believed the time had come. With a great and powerful army, he attacked the kingdom of Gondor. He captured Minas Ithil and destroyed Isildur's White Tree. But Isildur had escaped with a seedling of the tree, seeking Elendil with his wife and sons, sailing down the river and setting sail from the mouths of Anduin. Meanwhile, Anarion had defended Osgiliath against the enemy and had driven him back from the mountains for a time. But Sauron regrouped his forces, and Anarion knew that without help, his kingdom could not withstand him for long. Elendil and Gil-galad gathered a council together, for they understood that Sauron had grown very strong, and if they did not unite against him, he could defeat all his enemies in one-on-one battles. Thus, they formed this union, known as the Last Alliance, creating a great army of elves and men to march eastward across Middle-earth, and they halted for a time in Imladris. It is said that the army assembled there was more splendid and beautiful than any other seen in Middle-earth until that moment. None larger had been gathered since the Valar's host marched against Thangorodrim. From Imladris, they crossed the Misty Mountains, progressed down along the Anduin River, and finally confronted Sauron's army in the battlefield of Dagorland, lying before the gates of the Black Land. Every living thing, all races, even animals and birds, had divided that day to join the two armies. Only the elves did not. Only they remained undivided, following Gil-galad. A small portion of the dwarves had crossed over to the enemy side, but the lineage of Durin from Moria stood against Sauron. Gil-galad and Elendil's army achieved victory, because in those days the power of the elves was still great, and the fury of the strong, tall Númenóreans was terrifying. No one could withstand Gil-galad's spear Eglos. Elendil's sword filled men and orcs with fear, for it shone in the light of the sun and moon. Its name was Narsil. Gil-galad and Elendil advanced into Mordor and besieged Sauron's fortress. The siege lasted for 7 years, during which Sauron launched countless attacks to break the siege, and there were grievous losses due to the arrows, spears, and fire hurled by the enemy. Among many who fell in the valley of Gorgoroth was Anarion, son of Elendil. But finally, the siege was tightened so much that Sauron himself stepped forward to attack. He wrestled with both Gil-galad and Elendil, killing them both. And Elendil's sword was broken under the body that fell to the ground. But Sauron also fell, and Isildur cut the one ring from Sauron's hand with the broken hilt of Narsil. The time of defeat had now come for Sauron. He left his body, and his spirit fled far away, hiding in desolate places. It would take many years for him to take a visible form again. Even the sages of that age had no knowledge of what happened to the One Ring. It was as if it had never been made. Isildur did not deliver it to Elrond and Círdan. Their counsel to Isildur was to cast the ring into the fires of Orodruin, where it was forged. Thus, Sauron's power would be permanently extinguished, and it would become nothing more than a shadow of evil, hidden in the wilderness. But Isildur rejected this advice, saying, "I take the ring as a payment for my father's and brother's deaths. Did I not strike the enemy the deadly blow?" He was far too fond of the ring, and would not allow its destruction. Thus, wearing it, he first returned to Minas Anor, where he planted the white tree in memory of his brother Anarion. He gave counsel to his brother's son Meneldil, entrusting him with the kingdom of the south, and soon departed. He had taken the ring as a family heirloom of his lineage, making his way north along the path Elendil had taken, leaving Gondor behind. He aimed to claim his father's kingdom in Eriador, far away from the shadow of the Black Land. Isildur was ambushed by an army of orcs, lying in wait in the misty mountains. They suddenly attacked his camp in the Green Hills, between the Great River and the river Loegning Loron. As he had been careless and believed all his enemies were defeated, so he had not placed sentinels around. There, almost all his people were slaughtered, including his 3 great sons, Elendur, Eratan, and Sirion. He had left his wife and youngest son Valendil in Imladris while he went to war. Isildur was able to escape thanks to the ring, for the wearer became invisible to all eyes. The orcs followed him by scent and footprints until he reached the river and entered the water. As he entered the river, the ring betrayed him, taking vengeance on its maker, slipping from his finger and disappearing in the water. Thus, the orcs saw him in the current, and he was struck by many arrows, marking his end. Only 3 of his people were able to return after long journeys across the mountains. One of them was Otar, the sword-bearer who had received pieces of Elendil's sword Narsil for his protection. Thus, Narsil was properly delivered to Valendil, Isildur's heir, in Imladris. But the sword was broken and its light dimmed, and it had not yet been reforged. According to the prophecy of Master Elrond, this would not happen until the One Ring was found again, and Sauron returned. But both elves and men hoped that this would never occur. Thus began the 3rd age of the world, following the ancient days and the dark years. In those times, there was still a remembrance of hope and happiness. Isildur planted the sapling he had brought with him from Gondor, in memory of his brother in the fortress of Anor, and the white tree of the Eldar blossomed in the palace of the kings of men. The servants of Sauron, who had been defeated, fled to the mountains, but had not been entirely destroyed. Many men, having forsaken evil, had become bound to the heirs of Elendil. Yet the number of those who still remembered Sauron in their hearts and despised the kingdoms of the West remained large. The Black Tower had been laid low, but its foundations remained and were not forgotten. The Númenóreans had actually established an outpost upon the lands of Mordor, but no one dared to settle there due to the dread of Sauron's memories and the fire mountain rising beside Barad-dûr. and the valley of Gorgoroth was filled with ashes. Most of the elves and men who had allied with each other had perished during the war and siege. The Long Elendel and the High King Gil-galad were now gone. No such army would ever gather again, nor would there be such unity between elves and men. For after Elendel's death, the two races began to grow estranged. As the tale of the last alliance of elves and men comes to a close, let the bravery and unity of these legendary heroes guide you into a peaceful slumber. Remember, my fellow adventurers, that even in the face of insurmountable odds, the strength of unity and the courage of the heart can overcome the darkest of times. Thank you for joining me tonight. Until next time, may your dreams be filled with epic battles and heroic deeds. Good night.